Antonio Tulian Meldanine, and thank you once again for joining me. My name is Aramil, and once again I am joined by a very reluctant Louis. And in the background I have a less reluctant Megara.
Hello.
Oh, do you want Louis?
Yeah.
When he starts struggling,
Yeah.
I'll let you take him.
That was mostly what I was trying to get.
Oh, look at this boy.
That's a good squish.
Isn't this a happy boy?
It's a good melt.
Yes. Yes. Oh. He's making noises. I'm not certain that they're happy noises. Why would you do that? Oh.
Appease the fur baby gods.
Yes.
I like it how it's just a hand.
Yes.
With the bell ball.
There we go.
Goodbye.
Okay, fair enough. So today we will be talking about a campaign setting that I relatively recently, came across. That is the world of Dragonmech.
Woo-hoo!
Yes, this is a wonderful blend of D&D, steampunk, and giant robot mecha. Yes. Because how many of us have fond memories of Gundam or Zoids? That's it. Gundam or Zoids, and just like, you know what would be great if we mix this with Dungeons and Dragons. Good stuff. Oh. Ouch. You really got me. Okay. Oh. Here I have 3 Dragonmech books. I'm not certain if there are any more, but I'll probably find them if they do exist. So, of course, we've got your standard Dragonmech book. Of course, what you actually need. You have, instead of the monster manual, you have the mech manual, which really surprised me because it's a paperback, and I was not expecting that at all. Hello, Teru. Good to see you.
Hi,
Teru! So yeah, very interesting. And then the book that I actually first got was Dragonmech Second Age of Walkers, which basically details a bunch of the factions on the continent of High Point, where the setting is. So, what makes this setting special? I like it. I'm not going to lie. That doesn't exactly make it special, though. I like a lot of settings. But if you would, take your average, ordinary Dungeons and Dragons world setting, okay? Then make the moon drop down, not to the point where it's colliding, but instead to where it's getting basically cheese gratered by the atmosphere for 100 years. So you've got about 100 years of orbital bombardment. Just, as a strong spice. And then add the very recent development of giant mechs. And that kind of summarizes Dragonmech as a whole. So every night, the planet gets sandblasted, at least, and meteor swarmed at worst. And there is a little chart for the Dungeon Master somewhere in here to roll and see how bad it is on any specific night.
What is Venus's Marigem's title that she can actually read the skies?
Moon Watcher. Yeah, there's a feat which lets players make I think it might be just a wisdom check or a survival check, and
I think it's wisdom.
Might be. And
she reads the skies.
Yeah, she can basically okay, it's going to be, a bad sandblast for the next couple days, and on Thursday we're going to get a large meteor shower, so we might want to move.
Yeah, or like, oh, it's just gonna rain some pebbles, or like, let's run because we're about to die.
Yeah. So, let's see here. I found the chart. So it goes from rolling a natural 1, which is the best case scenario apparently, so no lunar rain. There's a 5% chance of not having hell from the sky. From a 2 to 16, you get a painful haze, so sandblasted. If you got natural armor of +2 or better, you're fine, or if you're wearing armor, you're pretty much fine. Everyone else takes 1d4 points of non-lethal damage per hour of exposure. All creatures have a 1% chance of being hit by a small meteorite that causes 1d6 points of damage. Okay, not bad. Not great. 17 through 18 is a small meteor shower. So as above, except everybody has a 25% chance of being hit by a meteorite. Fun. Finally, you get into the critical range, a 19 to 20, so a large meteor shower, except, all exposed creatures have a 25% chance per hour of being struck by a meteorite. On a 5 if struck, roll 1d6. On 1 to 4, they take that much damage. On a 5 to 6, roll a d6 again and add the results. And if you get a 5 or 6 again, you keep rolling. It's exploding dice, basically. Very dangerous. Very not good. Finally, if it's a full moon, you add, I think it's like a 5 to the roll. So at a 21 plus, it's a meteor storm. Yeah. It's basically every round. Let's see. If hit, you take damage determined by rolling a 1d10 and squaring the result. So, anywhere from 1 to 100 points of damage. Let's see, is that every half hour? Not something you want to be camping in. So that's kind of like the environmental damage. That's the environment of High Point, the main continent, which is decidedly against you. PvE is very dangerous in Dragonmech, which is fine, and has led to the creation of these giant mechs. So that people can still be outside and can travel in relative safety. They also talk about how people who can't afford a giant mech, which is, of course, most people, either live underground, smart, or they basically have wagons with, like, metal or stone plates on the top. Also, clever. So, these are some of the interesting things. There's a whole history and whatnot. But, of course, you might be asking yourself, what about dragons? So, Dragonmech, like I said, it's like a normal setting. But there is this added level of antagonism from the moon. Because, of course, not only are you being bombarded by moon bits for the past, 100 years, but along with the chunks of rock are actual creatures, apparently, that come down from the moon. The worst of which being the Lunar Dragons, which are an absolute nightmare. I wonder if I can really quickly find the picture, because they're fucking disgusting, first off. Okay, yeah, here we go. So, yeah. that thing. They're creepy as all hell. And they're really nasty. Like, looking at their stat blocks, they've got plenty of resistances. They've got a special breath weapon, which is, I think, Lunar Fire. So, unless you have blanket energy resistance, resistance to fire won't help you. You're just getting lunar energy shot at you. Yeah, so they're absolutely nasty and have contributed to, by and large, everybody vacating the surface world up until very recently, where, now you have mechs to defend yourself with. Yay! It's very necessary. So there's kind of, they give a reason why giant mechs are necessary, because you've got these giant monsters. Okay. It's fair. I mean, honestly, I can think of worse reasons to have mechs, so, yeah. Why not? And it's cool. They've got a few different factions, pulling out the Second Age Walkers book. And to an extent, there's a bit of stereotypical to them. Like, you've got the Elven Nation, the Dwarven Nation. Okay, fine. But you also have a couple of less typical factions. So to start off, we've got the Stenian Confederacy, which is a collection of not highly militarized, but pretty militarized. I guess all of these factions are pretty heavily militarized. But the Stenians are a grouping of what are known as city mechs. These are mechs so large that you can fit thousands of people on them safely. And they're really something. I'll get back to that, actually. But just focus on that and just kind of leave that topic dangling. But, yeah, so you've got, I don't know how many they've got now, but like 4 or 5 of these cities that are just walking around, which is amazing. Personally, I love it. It's hilarious. Because just like looking on a map, where's one of the cities is Netherpick. Well, where's Netherpick? Well, they were heading this way. So they should be about here now. The city moves. Fine. And I kind of like mobile cities, and this is a really interesting way of doing it. So, I mean, hey, why not? I'm trying to find... Okay, whatever. So, you've got the Stenian Confederacy, which is largely dwarves, but also you've got humans, gnomes, halflings, etc. Kind of the common races, all kind of mixed in gently. Then you have the Legion, which is almost fully human, and as a matter of fact, are kind of racist. Yeah. Honestly.
No.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, like, the idea behind the Legion is that the humans of this world have been largely nomadic for most of civilization. So they're trying to, like, carve out a human empire. And I can understand that, but they're still kind of racist. They're like, well, the elves have their forests and the dwarves have their mountains. But we need to make a strong human homeland. It's like, yeah. honestly, yeah, there is a bit of a cliche there for the pro-human. Oh well.
Pro-human.
I mean, at the same time, I can't think of anything that's more realistic.
Honestly. But, like, isn't RPG supposed to be not realistic?
Well, there is something to be said for that. But yeah. So, Legion, bit racist.
Only a tiny bit.
Yeah, right. Let's see. You also have and I'm probably going to butcher this, unfortunately. The Laurel? Laurel? Yeah. The Laurel Nation. So that's the Elven Nation, which are currently undergoing a bit of a culture shock because a lot of the elves, of course, remember before the bombardment began. They're just like they've lived through this long catastrophe, so that while most of the humans have never known a world before this 100-year-long orbital bombardment, the elves are like, wow, this is a really sucky Tuesday. Not quite, but you get the idea. And now suddenly people are coming around with mechs? Like, where did any of this come from? It's all good.
Is it?
Yeah. Well, they're doing their best to adapt. They have what are known as animated mechs, so they're blending magic in with this mecha more so than the other nations, which is really kind of cool. Let's see here. And I gotta say, I like it. Definitely an interesting take on a lot of it. So, let's see. Finally, and of course there are a bunch of like minor factions, but the last big faction are the loose gathering of clans known as the Iron Tooth clans.
Ooh, yeet.
Yeah. Who are like mech pilot barbarian monks. Yeah, I'm gonna let that just kind of filter into your brain.
Let that simmer and marinate in your brain.
Yeah. So these guys are.
I just want you to know that you said the phrase barbarian monks.
Yeah, I know it's really fuckety, but they come out of a kind of blending of traditions, or more accurately, like you have all the outcasts of the Stenian Confederacy. So all these dwarves who aren't, I hate to use the word mainstream, but who aren't mainstream. So you've got the outcasts, you've got the like monks on the periphery, and just all these people who aren't really interested in the mainline dwarven traditions. You say, like, basically, fuck you, I'm gonna go do my own thing. And over time, they've formed into all these different clans, which are probably the most racially diverse of anything. Any of the factions that we've talked about, like, they openly accept half-orcs, sometimes as leadership positions. Just like, okay. I hate to say might makes right, but there's a strong idea of the best fighter and the best mech pilot, and often those two being the same, generally are the ones who are supposed to lead. And that's fine. In a world where your ability to pilot a mech is literally life or death. And so, okay. And I mean, I like them because they're kind of chaotic, they're kind of cool, they kind of got this whole tradition of mech jousting. And I was just like, alright. Actually, I kind of wish one of my other players was here in chat to talk about it.
You talking about Justin?
No. I'm trying to think of his dag name because I don't use people's real names on stream because that's not cool.
What?
What? I don't use people's real names. Gary. Yeah, his dag name's Gary. That's
His dag name is Gary.
yeah. Geri, apparently. Okay.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, we... And I think also, Teru, I think you also took part in an Ashigaru mech joust. You're in here somewhere. So, yeah, they're very, very interesting. Definitely very Oriental inspired, which I guess comes from the whole monastic traditions, which is cool. Yeah, so all of their mechs are kind of stereotypically Oriental flavored. Yeah. The very basic, trainer mech is an Ashigaru, which would have been, a feudal Japanese foot soldier. And, of course, they use a lance, because, of course, why not? And it's just all sorts of cool things like that. So, yeah, I like the Iron Tooth clans. I like the world building, I gotta say. It's pretty interesting, overall. Okay. Let's see here. One thing that I also like is that they go through on how to build a mech, and it's not so complicated of a rule system that I can't... I can understand this. It takes you a few minutes, maybe a read-through or two, but you can get the idea of what to do. But I gotta say also, and this is really helpful for especially a giant mecha campaign, but I really like how they have expanded the size category list. Because normally, in D&D, it goes up to Colossal, and then anything after Colossal is just Colossal. You just got Colossal and just more Colossal. It reminds me of, I don't even remember what the book was called, but it was basically a children's novel where these people had no word for 4, all right? There was 1, 2, 3, and lack. Just anything beyond 3 is just lack. There's just a lack. Lots. Yeah, I'm not saying it's realistic. I was saying that it's fun.
Again, RPG does not necessarily have to be realistic, I guess.
Well, but this one's better, is what I'm getting to. Because you've got Colossal, and I mean, they're not terribly original, but I'll accept it. Just Colossal, Colossal 2, Colossal 3, Colossal 4, Colossal 5. Okay, fine. And this goes from Colossal being 35 feet tall to Colossal 5 at 165. So, the average... What is the height of the average skyscraper, you think?
In reality?
Yeah, in reality.
So tall.
Yeah, so tall.
Like 42 to 60 floors?
42 to 60? Okay. So, we're not there yet. But after Colossal 5, we jump up to the next category, which is City Mech A. Yes. So back to that idea of city mechs.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Somebody driving past. So yeah, a City Mech A, which is like 240 feet tall. So this is the smallest of the City Mechs. And it goes all the way up to City Mech F.
No. No.
Yeah. Which is 1,800 feet tall. Mind you, almost every one of these mechs is anthropomorphic. 2 legs, 2 arms, torso, maybe a head. So these are veritable titans that are walking bipedally. Why? That's my only, like, that's one thing that I can't get over, is that almost all of these mechs are bipedal, which make no sense to me. I would not choose a bipedal mech, at all. That's just a bad idea, as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, so the mech design, getting back to that, is pretty simple overall. You know, they go through it all. They have different power sources. So, you know, there's ones that are steam powered. They're kind of the default. Alright? So they've got a boiler, and steam turns the pistons, which makes the mech go. Cool. Then you have the very cheap, but, you know, helpful manpower. Yeah, so you basically have a bunch of people turning the cranks, literally, and just, that's what makes the mech go. You have clockwork mechs, so basically tightly wound springs, the expensive highbrow. Alternatively, you have the animated mechs, so basically giant golems that you ride and direct. Okay, cool. And finally, perhaps the creepiest version, naturally, are the undead mechs. Yeah, it's a walking pile of corpses. Ah.
Welcome to the jungle.
Yeah. I think the creepiest one that I ever came across, I think it was in the mech manual, but it was a small city mech, an undead city mech.
That's a hard pass.
Yeah, like, no thank you. No thank you. We're good. Yeah, let's see, over the course of like 3-4 pages, they go through like how much it would cost to make a mech, how much time is required, the average like labor, and it's honestly pretty simple. I can go through all of this, and honestly, I don't need to go through looking for other. Oh, what's it? I don't have to put this down, grab half a dozen other books, and be referencing through them all to figure out what I want to do. I need this, maybe the mech manual, maybe, if I want some additional content. And a calculator. Definitely a calculator. Because I'm not good at math. If you are good at math, then you could probably get away with it, but I like to use a calculator just to be on the safe side. And, yeah, and, like, it goes through here, and, like, one of the things that I talk about is material costs are based primarily on the use of iron. Wood and stone are also used, but the primary cost driver is iron. 1 pound of iron costs 1 silver piece, as detailed in the player's handbook. Cool. There we go. So you know that if the players, have, 1,000 pounds of scrap iron, let's say, then they basically take, what would that be, 100 gold pieces off of their mech's construction. Alright, cool. There you go. Now, of course, this doesn't include, like, it doesn't go into gross detail, but it does talk about, like, the different effects of different qualities of labor crews. It talks about average, above average, skilled, expert, human labor, as well as how helpful zombies and or other undead would be versus, like, constructs. You have constructs here, too, so, you know, they're thinking about all these different things. No, she's allowed to,
I thought she was scratching the carpet.
No, it's the scratching post. Good girl, Mew. Keep it up. Yeah, it's a good girl.
For anybody else who's confused from the live stream, Mew is absolutely destroying her scratching post.
Right. One other thing that's kind of interesting is that a lot of the mechs can be critically hit, which I find pretty interesting. And they go through all sorts of, like, critical hits and, you know, targeting, like, cold shots. Cold shots, that's the word. And they honestly say, like, well, it's up to the DM what a cold shot would do, but here are some examples, which is probably the best thing that you could say. Because it gives the DM just enough to start working from, and not so much that I have to refer back to a chart every time somebody decides, well, I'm going to, I don't know, swing an axe at the mech's arm, right arm. Okay, great. So it's not as bad as, say, the grappling rules from AD&D, which, if memory serves, were 3 tomes in and of themselves. Yeah, but how would you like that? It's just like, okay, my left foot is on is at a 45-degree angle and on stone, but my right foot is at a 90-degree angle on grass, which gives me a +2. Oh, yeah. Apparently the grappling rules for AD&D were nasty.
That gave me a migraine.
Yeah, and that was just a small fraction.
No!
Mm-hmm. Then you have to take into account your opponent. We are on a 30-degree incline. No. Actually, it's funny. They outright say that mechs can't grapple, which I find absolutely hilarious. It's just like somewhere throughout here, they're like, mechs cannot grapple. They are not flexible enough to grapple, and that just means that both mechs topple to the ground.
Try to grapple, you die.
Pretty much. Actually, it's kind of funny. A downed mech is just a bad time for the mech pilot. Because you get to roll whether you're face up, on your left, on your right, face down. And this is important because different weapons obviously will be affected differently. Like if you've got on the mech's left shoulder, it's got like a massive cannon, because there are cannons. They're called steam cannons and steam guns. So we'll get to that in a moment. But yeah, so if you're laying like on the ground, or, like on your left side, you might not be able to aim your cannon. But if you're on your right side, well, then at least you can fire. Cool. But if you're on your back, it's a bad time. Yeah. Just... What was the DC here? Okay, yeah. So it's the base DC is 20 to get up. And if you are face up, it's at 24. So when Gary fell on his back at the beginning of combat one day, I was afraid he was going to rage quit by the end of the session, because he spent the entire combat just turtled, just trying so hard to get up. And it was funny for the first couple minutes, and then it's funny in retrospect. But it got really sad, and yet hilarious, because of course we're assholes still. Oh. Let's see here. Yeah, so if you're face down in a mech, there's no problem getting back up, of course. Now, one other thing that I really like about the setting, beyond just your neat mechs and a pretty compelling setting, is they add in several classes which I feel are good. Very interesting classes, very, very valuable classes. Like some settings will add in, especially other D20 that aren't by TSR, or TSR. That's... No. TSR went out of business like 20, 30 years ago. TSR are the ones who made, or who published, like, AD&D and, like, early editions. So first and second edition D&D, and then it got taken over by Wizards of the Coast, we all know and love. So people who aren't Wizards of the Coast will sometimes come up with base classes which seem very superfluous. Sometimes they make sense in the campaign setting, but when compared to Player's Handbook classes, they just aren't that great. Kind of looking at Iron Kingdoms for this one. Gun mages are cool, not awesome, not that great. And also, we've got a wizard variant, arcane mechanic, which again are kind of cool, but just aren't all that. I mean, I'm sure you can build perfectly viable arcane mechanics and gun mages and what have you. Don't get me wrong. And I love that campaign setting for completely different reasons. But I really like these. Because they, especially in the Dragonmech world, they make a lot of sense and they're really kind of cool. Bless you. Gesundheit. Godzilla Blats. Keep going, I have more languages. Okay. So they do have their own variant wizard called a constructor. So again, it's basically mixing wizard with engineer. Um, yeah. Um, but it's more like you've flavored a wizard, and it's more like like choosing a specialty. So like an evocation specialist, a necromancy specialist, a constructor specialist. Okay, cool. But then you get into some of the other interesting things, like mech jockey. Okay, and these guys are really cool. Like, of course, the whole thing practically revolves around being in a mech, but that's kind of expected. It's called Dragonmech. There's if you're running a campaign and there aren't mecha, then you're doing something wrong in this setting. Um, and if you are kind of hesitant about the players being in a giant mech at the beginning of the campaign, there are mechs that are small enough and underpowered enough that they feel more appropriate for a first level character. Like we ran around with a couple Ashigaru mechs, and they have they definitely give a lot of bang for the buck, um, but almost all of the sorcerer's 0 level spells were used for mending, and we had another character who was constantly trying to repair these mechs, and that's expensive stuff too. Like they do not pull any punches with the cost of repairing a mech. They are nasty when it comes to that, as a matter of fact. So these characters were constantly looking for scrap, constantly trying to find ways to repair their mechs. And it really did help this feeling that, the mechs are very valuable and very strong, but once they start getting damaged, uh, we quickly have an issue. Like, if it drops below half health, that's a whole new bracket of cost, and it's terrible. Um, so, in addition to the mech jockey, you have the Cog Layer, which is somewhere around here, which I really got them to say that I really enjoy. Uh, because the whole thing about a Cog Layer is they have these inventions. They call them steam powers, all right? And each day, you re-up your steam powers. But the steam powers themselves can be modified and put together in different ways. I'm going to try and find a couple of them. So, like, you might have... Oh, what's a good one? A drill, alright? A drill. So, this is a normal drill with a steel bit, 12 inches long and 2 inches wide at the base. It can drill 6 inches per round through solid stone. Cool. If wielded as a weapon, the drill is medium, weighs 7 pounds, and causes 1d4 points of damage. Alright. But you could combine them. Combo, if you will. So combining the drill doubles their size, damage, and speed. Or you could put on an amplifier, which causes the damage die to increase by 1. So, like, what was it? 1d4 turns to 1d6. Okay, so on and so forth. And you can keep stacking these things in different ways. You might instead grab a rotor arm, okay, which can be you basically have this spinning, well, rod basically attached to your arm. So you could either be using it as a shield or maybe as a melee weapon, like they even say like a steampunk weed whacker, or you could design it so that it points to the sky and creates lift. So it can lift up to 40 pounds at a speed of 40 feet. And there's like, 2-3 dozen of these steam powers, which you can just mix and match in all sorts of really interesting and some of them quite compelling ways. You could have a crossbow that reloads itself and automatically shoots at enemies. Like, okay, I see what you're getting at. That's pretty neat, right? So, like I said, they've got some really cool classes going here. And the last one I'll talk about is the Steamborg. Because these are just crazy things. They start off really underpowered, and it's kind of sad. But once it hits like 3rd or 4th level, you really can see some pretty good improvement. These are basically people who are replacing chunks of their body with robot bits, all powered by steam. So the first thing they do at first level is they get a steam engine put in their chest. Yeah, it's it's kind of cool, kind of weird, very interesting overall, and fits in very well with the campaign setting. Ashenra is playing a Steamborg that has both of his legs replaced. And later on they get steam powers also at 4th level, which, jeez, and they can only use their steam powers like on themselves to do this, that, or the other. So he's like increased his dex and increased his base move speed. So he's just sprinting. We call him Steamy Legs. Yeah, and he's just like, I think he's got like a 40-foot move speed right now, and plans to increase that further. Yeah, it's some crazy stuff. It's good. It's a really interesting setting, I gotta say. And I'm kind of surprised that I've been talking for 50 minutes already. So yeah, if you're a fan of steampunk, of giant mechs, I heartily suggest that you check this out. It's really interesting. I got these books off of Amazon, but that was after checking out the PDFs for a fair amount of time. If memory serves, they're on the Trove, thetrove.net. So you can go and you can look through them whenever you like. The artwork is pretty neat. Here, there we go. There's a little chicken walker for you. I think they call it a shuriken. Basically, it's a two-legged walker that fires massive, like, buzz saws. Like, why wouldn't you want this? Or, over here. Yeah. We've got the Ashigaru mech. Or, I think that might... Well, it's something else. I'm sorry. That's a sensei mech. Yeah, right? Anyways, but it's a really cool setting. I strongly suggest everybody check it out at least once. Just kind of breeze through it if you like. And thank you for joining me. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, because we're coming out with these live streams every week. And let me know what you think about the idea of, giant mechs in D&D. So, until next time, thank you for joining me. I've been Lord Aramil, signing off.